Hello everyone! In today's video, I'm working on the 1/24 scale shop that I introduced on this channel a little while back. The shop is constructed using leftover pieces of MDF and house paint. I've been gradually adding various tools, parts, and accessories, some of which I've 3D printed, built from styrene, or have accumulated over time. As with pretty much any other project I do, the main goal is to have fun and try out some new building techniques, as well as hopefully provide all of you with some ideas and inspiration. I wanted to try and get the shop looking as realistic as possible, though I won't be investing huge amounts of time trying to make every square inch look photorealistic. It's been a while since I uploaded the first video, and I can't quite remember everything that I did. I know I introduced the project and assembled this 2-post lift. I also made these office windows and doors that turned out looking pretty good, but due to using the same image, it looks like there are multiple suns. I've got an idea for making new background images that I want to try, so I'll be swapping these out in the future. In this video, I'm going to be adding some more items, as well as doing a lot of painting. The first thing I wanted to add was some detail to the ceiling. I decided to make some support pieces that would be glued to the top. Although it's just a small section that isn't the main focal point, I still thought it would be nice to add a little detail to an otherwise plain section. After taking a few quick measurements, I worked on the design. The design is extremely simple, as you can see, and will also be very easy to print. After each was printed, I used a hobby knife to clean up some edges and then sanded each one. Later, I'll apply paint. I removed everything that I had on the back of the shop so I could add some black trim around the bottom, just like I did on the other wall. To do this, I used some 6mm black tape. Aside from being a little hard to reach, it's easy to apply around the bottom, and I like how it looks once it's added. Next, I worked on the garage door and pedestrian door from the left wall. The garage door was handmade using sheets of styrene, and the smaller door was 3D printed. Both were looking really nice, and were just about ready for paint. The only thing I wanted to do first was add some filler to the upper corners of the garage door, and then do some sanding on each. After that, each door was ready for paint. Next, I worked on completing the post-print finishing work for the 2-post lifts that I'll be adding. I started by sanding each post to help remove the layering. I then sanded all of the other parts and began test fitting them. I laid out all of the parts needed for one lift. You can order these parts from our online store, linked below, or you can get access to the STL files by becoming a Maker Tier patron. Some assembly is required on the arms. These upper and lower sections are separate parts to make them much easier to print. I use a little super glue to hold the guide pin in place, then secure each part together with more glue. After a little sanding, I finished assembling all the parts. doing any sanding that's necessary to ensure everything fits. I'll later be painting all of the parts before the final assembly. Moving on to the jack stands, I wanted to do just a bit of sanding before painting. These Make It RC 124 scale jack stands come out of the bag looking really nice, though there are a few spots on some of them that I want to clean up. Some of the jack stands I'm using for the shop have imperfections which prevent us from selling them, however they'll still look great for this project. To make painting easier, I tape them to some popsicle sticks and use red enamel paint for the base. I don't worry about the paint being too thin in spots, because having some of the black showing through gives them a slightly dirty and oily look. After the red is dry, I move on to painting the tops white. Then I paint the tips of the handles flat black. The finished result looks great. In addition to the jack stands, I printed out a variety of scale accessories that I sanded and will later paint. All of these parts turned out looking good right off the printer, so I didn't need to do a lot of sanding. Along with sanding, applying several heavy coats of primer can also help to smooth the surface. At this point, everything was ready for paint. For some parts used on the two-post lifts, I made sure to keep the coats of paint as light as possible, otherwise the thick paint might make the parts hard to assemble. After letting the paint fully dry, I assembled the two-post lifts. On the first lift that I built in the previous video, I used white lithium grease, which worked well, but I didn't like the appearance. This time I mixed some graphite powder to make it a dark gray, which works well and looks a lot better than the white grease used previously. I worked the grease into all of the moving parts as I assembled each lift. I then glued the top cover onto each post. Finally, I painted some details onto the side controls and glued each to the post. With each lift now complete, they could be mounted into place. I figured out the position I wanted each post, and then drilled pilot holes for the screws to thread into. The ceiling support pieces were secured using glue. I measured the distance between each to ensure they were spaced evenly. Before adding the doors, there were a few spots around the opening that I wanted to paint to ensure the bare MDF wouldn't stand out. Both doors turned out looking great. After painting a few details onto the pedestrian door and adding a piece of clear plastic, I installed each. I might put some sort of trim around the outside of each since the opening is a little rough, but other than that, the doors look great after being painted. Here's a look at the remaining accessories after several coats of paint. I might do some additional painting and weathering, however already they're looking nice. I'll be adding a lot more details in the future, but for now, I'm already really liking how the shop is looking. If you're interested in some of the items used in this video, be sure to check out the links below in the description to get your own, or consider becoming a member on Patreon to have access to the STL files for you to print. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.